This story, titled Her Confession, My Husband's Distance, Is It My Imagination or the Truth, starts like a scene ripped straight from a movie. But this was my reality. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old, and I've been married to Jason for 12 years. We have a house we built together, one that we filled with laughter, love, and dreams for the future. For all the years we've been together, I thought we were in sync. We were partners, soulmates, or at least, I believed we were. It all started about 6 months ago when Jason's best friend, Allison, confessed that she had been in love with him. You could call it a moment that changed everything, but I didn't realize the weight of those words until much later. At first, Jason brushed it off, laughing it off like it was nothing. "She's just confused," he said. "It's nothing more than a fleeting feeling." But in the days that followed, something shifted. Jason started acting differently. I noticed it when we were at home, when we sat on the couch after dinner, and he seemed distracted, staring at his phone with an almost nervous tension. He didn't hold my hand as often, and the little gestures that once came naturally between us, like his hand on my back when he passed by or the way he would look at me when we spoke, began to disappear. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, Jason reassured me that he hadn't felt anything for Allison, and that I had no reason to worry. "You're overreacting," he told me, his voice almost pleading, as if he couldn't understand why I was so upset. But his words didn't ease the knot that had formed in my stomach. And then came the nights when he came home late. Jason had always been someone who would text me when he was running late or out with friends, but now his texts were sparse. When I asked where he'd been, he brushed it off. "Just catching up with the guys," he'd say, but there was always something in his voice that felt off. I remember one night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling while he snored beside me. I replayed the events over and over in my head. Why would Allison, of all people, tell Jason she loved him? They had always been close. Close enough that I sometimes felt a little uncomfortable with their bond, but I never questioned it. They had been friends for years, and I trusted Jason. He always made me feel safe in our relationship. But now, things felt different. Jason's behavior had changed, and I couldn't ignore it. I needed answers, so I did what I thought I needed to do. I confronted him. "Jason," I began, my voice trembling even as I spoke. "I don't know what's going on with you, but something feels wrong. Ever since Allison told you she loved you, you've been different. I'm not blind. I can see it. What's going on?" Jason sat up, running his hand through his hair. He looked at me, his face tense. "Claire, I told you, it's nothing. She's just confused, okay? I haven't thought about her like that. It's you I'm with. It's always been you." But even as he said the words, I saw the distance in his eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. A coldness. Something that wasn't there before. I didn't know if it was the guilt of his friend's confession or if something else was brewing, but I could feel it. The space between us had widened. It was as if there was this invisible wall that neither of us could cross. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in our home only grew. Jason was becoming more withdrawn, more distant, and I found myself questioning everything. Was I overreacting? Was I being paranoid? After all, Allison had been his best friend for so long. What if this was just an awkward phase, one that would eventually pass? But deep inside, I knew that wasn't the case. The doubt that had taken root in my heart had begun to grow. I couldn't ignore it anymore, and I couldn't just let it go either. I wanted to believe Jason, but every time he reassured me, I heard the uncertainty in his voice, and I saw the hesitation in his eyes. One evening, I had had enough. I couldn't keep living like this. The uncertainty was eating me alive, and I needed answers. I needed clarity. "Jason, I need you to be honest with me," I said, my voice firm. "What's really going on? Are you seeing someone else? Is there something you're not telling me?" His eyes widened, a flash of surprise crossing his face. "Claire, I'm not seeing anyone else. I don't know what you want me to say. I told you, there's nothing between Allison and me." But I could see the cracks in his words, the way his voice wavered when he said Allison's name, how his eyes darted away for just a second. It wasn't just the words, it was the silence that followed, the hesitation, the lie buried in the space between us. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Jason," I whispered. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is okay when you're pulling away from me. This isn't the marriage we built. This isn't what I signed up for." His face softened, and he reached out for me. "Claire, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know. I'm confused. I've been dealing with this with Allison, and it's making everything feel so complicated. But I'm still here. I'm still yours." But his words felt empty. I wanted to believe him, to hold on to the hope that our love was enough to fix this. But deep down, I knew I couldn't live in this state of constant doubt. I needed more than just words. I needed trust, I needed security, and I needed to feel like the woman who mattered most to him. The days went on, and the distance between us only seemed to widen. Jason's assurances were no longer enough to calm my fears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that there was more to this situation than he was willing to admit. As the days stretched on, I found myself trapped in this whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, Jason continued to insist that I was overreacting, that I was imagining things. But on the other hand, his actions spoke louder than any of his words. The silence between us grew unbearable, each day pulling us further apart. I couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of the end? Was I losing him to Allison? Or was I simply afraid of a reality I didn't want to face? I tried to keep myself busy, distracting myself with work, hobbies, and even socializing with friends. But when I returned home, the same gnawing feeling always returned. It was like a constant weight on my chest, suffocating me, making it impossible to breathe easily. One evening, after a long day at work, I decided to go through with it. I had been debating whether to confront Allison directly. I knew Jason would be furious, but I was at my breaking point. I needed to know the truth. Was I just some fool holding on to a relationship that was already crumbling? Or was I truly overreacting? I wasn't sure anymore. I decided to call her. My heart raced as I dialed her number, each ring making me feel more and more like I was betraying Jason. But what was worse, having a conversation with his best friend, or continuing to live in this fog of uncertainty? It wasn't healthy. I needed closure. When she answered, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "Hello?" she answered, her voice soft. "Hi, Allison. It's Claire," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "I need to talk to you. I've been feeling really uncertain about everything, and I just need to understand." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I couldn't tell if she was shocked or if she had been expecting this. Finally, she spoke again. "I'm sorry, Claire," she began, her voice softer than I anticipated. "I didn't mean for it to cause so much tension. I really didn't. But I can't pretend anymore. I've loved Jason for a long time, and when I told him, I thought maybe he'd feel the same way." My heart sank as she spoke. Hearing her admit it so matter-of-factly, with such an eerie calmness, felt like a slap in the face. All those months of doubt, all the subtle signs I'd ignored, suddenly felt so real, so undeniable. It was like someone had ripped away the blindfold I'd been wearing, and for the first time I saw the truth in its cold, ugly form. "I never meant to hurt you," she continued, her voice now filled with regret. "And I know this is hard, but I didn't know how else to tell you. Jason and I, we've always had this bond, and maybe I thought he'd eventually see me the way I see him. But I swear to you, Claire, I never wanted to come between you two." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her, demand to know why she'd kept her feelings a secret for so long. But another part of me understood that sometimes emotions don't follow logic. Sometimes you fall in love with someone you're not supposed to. Sometimes you act on those feelings, even if you know it could destroy everything. "Thank you for being honest with me," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think about everything." I hung up the phone, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The truth was out there, but now I had to face it. Jason had been avoiding me, but now I knew why. Allison's confession had left a mark on their relationship, a mark that I couldn't erase with a few words of reassurance. The bond they shared was real. It wasn't something I could just ignore. The night was long, the silence deafening as I sat in the living room, trying to piece everything together. What was I supposed to do now? I had always believed in love and trust, but this felt like a betrayal of everything I had fought for. And the worst part? I couldn't stop loving Jason. I didn't want to walk away from the life we had built together. But how could I stay with someone who was emotionally distant, someone whose heart might not belong to me anymore? The next morning, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to confront Jason, face to face, no more hiding behind the walls of silence. We needed to talk. When he came home that evening, I was waiting for him. I couldn't look away from him, even though everything in me wanted to turn and run. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had settled on them. He walked in, closing the door softly behind him, but neither of us spoke. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Jason, we need to talk." He looked at me, his face unreadable, but his eyes were filled with something I couldn't place. Guilt? regret, maybe even love. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the truth. I know what's been going on, I said, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. I spoke to Allison last night. She told me everything, about how she's been in love with you for so long. His expression changed in an instant, his face pale, as if he had been caught in a lie. Claire, I never meant for it to go this far. You don't have to explain it to me, Jason, I said quietly. I just need you to tell me one thing. Do you love me? Do you still love me the way I love you? There was a long pause, and in that silence I could hear my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. I didn't want to hear the answer. I didn't want the truth if it meant losing him. I don't know, Claire, he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. I don't know what I feel. And just like that, the world I had carefully built around us came crashing down. I stood up and walked to the door, the tears streaming down my face. Then maybe it's time for us to let go. Maybe it's time to face the truth. If my story resonates with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your thoughts matter, and I'd love to hear your experiences.